Welcome to another episode of the Community Podcast, a conversational podcast exploring the stories, insights, and strategies behind learning centric communities. Our mission is to inspire listeners by highlighting individuals who are shaping the future of how people come together to learn, grow, and thrive. I'm thrilled to welcome Abubakar Sheriff, founder of Qarib, a community driven events platform designed to bring people together through diverse, inclusive experiences. With a background in instructional technology and a lifelong commitment to community building, Abubakar merges technical innovation with a deep understanding of what brings people closer spiritually, socially, and professionally. Abubakar, it's awesome to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me. That was a great introduction.
Uh, well, it's awesome to have you, and I'm excited to dive into a bit about your journey. One of the things that makes you different from all the guests I've had on the show before is you are actively building a social platform that is both people-centered and technology-centered, right? So all the other guests that I've had, many of them are active in community building, but they're leveraging uh, other third-party platforms. You're actually building one, right? So I'm gonna love I'm going to really enjoy kind of diving into that side of the equation. But why don't you start, Booker, with giving our audience a bit more of your background, where you grew up, and how you came to view community as this vehicle for change?
Yeah, thank you again for that awesome introduction, Arhan. I'm really excited to be here and share my story and the journey of Qarib. A little bit about I was born and raised in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. My dad was a student there, and he ended up staying there after college. And pretty much we all grew up there, right? And shortly after a few years, we moved to the United States. Grew up in Philadelphia, one of the most roughest urban cities in the U.S. And that's kind of where my journey began with community development. My father's role was a community leader until today. He's an imam, and he established the very first masjid in the area where we grew up, which is still running today, 25 plus years later. So seeing him, seeing his leadership, seeing his influence in the community directly, indirectly impacted the work that I do today.
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly important personal story cultivated by what you saw your father doing, having the multicultural background where you had to shift gears when you moved to the US, and we're seeing all of these different elements within your cultural upbringing as a very young child. I think the anchor, potentially, if I can project where I would feel myself to be in a similar situation, is what can we hold on to? Amongst the chaos, amongst all the differences, amongst feeling like you're different from others, what really brings you together? So that I'm sure had a big part to play in your development.
Really. Definitely did have a lot to do with it because it was just an interesting journey being at the center of community my whole life, right? Due to the work that my father played, bringing people together, helping them out through resources. And it's not an easy task being a community leader. Many people think it's glamorous being in the limelight or being in that position, but there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that most don't know. I've evolved into this today where it brings me great joy and satisfaction to help people, to bring people together, whether it's through resources or opportunities that enhances their own individual well-being. That's essentially a greater extension of our mission at Qarib, which I'll get into in a moment. I'm sure you have your questions lined up for me.
What I would love to understand is what was the spark that, what was a catalyst that got you thinking about, okay, there's other tools, platforms, and solutions when it comes to building communities, bringing people together. I'm sure your background in instructional technology had a part to do with it, right? Because you and I actually both have a background in education technology and e-learning and those kinds of things. So you probably had an opportunity to tinker with technology as part of your studies and work environment. What was it that really let you emerge as the pain point or need that you felt like, man, I got to do my own thing?
Interestingly, the catalyst for this whole thing was that I missed a Muslim entrepreneurs event that I really wanted to attend. I had just relocated to Dallas and I was trying to get involved in community, find out what's going on, what's happening. And as someone who's always been in the know, been in the community spaces, for the first time, I kind of just felt like a fish out of water, didn't know anything. So when I missed that event, I was frustrated. I said, I have to do something about this. I ended up finding out about the event through one of those bulletin boards you see in your local mosque. You just catch up on stuff, and I see a newspaper ad about this event. And I was just like, there's got to be a better way to promote or advertise this, right? There's so many amazing things happening. They're just getting missed because of how poorly advertised they are. When I missed that event, because I really wanted to connect with folks in the entrepreneurial space, Muslims, like minded, value alignment, I said, you know what? I think it's time I try to do something about this. So I used all my experience with technology. And initially, what I did was I just created like an email list and had everyone send me their events, and I would just manually load that into one big calendar. But that eventually became laborious as there was a lot of manual work involved. But the demand was there. People were sending me their information. They just didn't want to do it themselves. That's essentially the spark behind how Qarib started, through a personal pain, frustration that I experienced of a missed opportunity.
No, I love that. I think there's something to be said about recognizing a need and then jumping into the action portion of it, right? What can I do to change this? So many entrepreneurs and so many folks who initially get frustrated with the status quo find themselves scratching that itch every now and then, but to really be able to take steps to bring about a real change and address a pain point, that's what separates the 10% from the 90%. Now tell me a bit about the story. So Qarib as a word, it's an Arabic word, right? What's the meaning of this word and why did you choose to make this the name of your app?
Qarib is an Arabic word that means close by, nearby, but Qarib, it's interesting linguistically, it could have different meanings, right? In Arabic could be my relative, someone nearby. So I chose that name because it's truly summarizes the essence of what we want to build here. Everything nearby, close, in proximity, whether it's an event, resource, information, anything that can help you from an individual standpoint, a professional standpoint, or community standpoint. It's close. And so that's essentially how we landed on the name. I just didn't want to pick a random name, right? I wanted the name to have meaning. Then I just said, Qarib is short, sweet, punchy, powerful, and that encompasses that whole essence of cooperation or being one ummah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a very catchy name and something that stays within someone's memory when you see something that reflects not only a different linguistic and cultural origin, but is very relevant in the modern day and in the kind of work we're doing. I've always loved saying to friends, colleagues, people in my circles, proximity is possibility, right?
Mm,
When you
like
find
that.
yourself, yeah, when you find yourself in an ecosystem in which people are engaged in inquisitive building, where people are pushing the boundaries of their understanding, of they're questioning things, right? They're seeking knowledge, they're building systems, or they're coming up with solutions. That doesn't happen in a vacuum. It can happen on an individual level. We all ponder day to day. We all have our own, we do brainstorming and we plan and do things on our own. But where the change really takes place when you're trying to actionably demonstrate the value of knowledge or learning and coming together, all of that really supercharges when you have that community element. Just to give an example, if I were to find myself in a small town where the opportunities are few and far between, I could make a difference. I could be the only person putting up flyers, the only person talking about, hey, let's get together, let's do things. But my impact would be capped at a certain level, right? In a larger city like Dallas or Boston, where there's just so much more happening and there's that buzz in the air, right? When like-minded folks come together, if you're all very invested in building community, that impact is just going to be so much more exponentially higher, right? So proximity is possibility. I try to tell, again, one of the things that I really believe in is if you're doing good work, but I feel like you're not making the impact that you can generate, find your tribe, find people that are going to agree with you. Get those best practices, right? Learn from them. Not only agree with you, I should say, disagree with you. It's good to have conflict, right? Find people who are willing to have that journey with you. So I think that really crystallizes the community building element that is so central to your mission.
I love
What are your thoughts?
about that. And it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, just being in the right spaces, the right circles of those that see your vision, that align with the direction you're trying to take. I'll be honest, it hasn't been an easy journey building this while we're trying to solve this problem. Sometimes it's hard getting through certain folks who have a certain way of working or thinking. Primarily, when I'm speaking to folks in different spaces, whether it's Muslims here in the US or Muslims outside of the US, the mindsets are different. When I talk to Muslims outside of the US, they see the vision, they get it, they're ready to jump on board, and they're excited about it. Whereas my experience with Muslims in the West or the US is like they see it, they get it, but it's like we already have an existing solution, right? Whether it's an Eventbrite or an alternative. So they see the need, but it's not urgent. We don't have a platform that exists. It's scattered. There is no proximity. We're trying to create something new, which is always a challenge. So I've been positioning Qarib as it's always been a global platform, right? Because communities are all around the world. But in terms of what you're trying to make and what I'm trying to tie into is working with those that see the vision early on and can help you accelerate your impact. We call those early adopters, right? The late adopters, once they see the vision, they'll eventually come on board. I'm focusing a lot of my efforts and energy towards folks that get it, that see where we're trying to go and that can help push. Then we'll bring everyone else along once we get there.
Yeah. And I think part of it too is as I build a business and I try to determine, there's so many other services and consultants that do the kind of work that I do. Identifying your niche, identifying the segment of the population that you really want to serve, despite the fact that there may be 20 other competitors out there at different price points, offer different features, right? The fact that you very intentionally, right from the get-go, you wanted a platform specifically for Muslims to highlight their Muslim spaces, Muslim community building, right? You're very intentional and deliberate about the way that you want this platform to grow, and you're sticking to that, which I think is commendable. With regards to how this platform is coming together, I'd love for you to share a little bit about, you mentioned the global focus. There's definitely focus cities just from seeing the website, and we'll put the website in our show notes as well, along with Booker's information. But tell me about the process. If somebody wants to join the community or host an event on the community, what's the process like for somebody who's interested, maybe listening right now?
Right. So the process now is very simple, right? We have a few select cities on the platform. This is where people can add events or see what's happening in those cities. We were very focused since we relaunched the MVP to focus more on major metro cities where Muslims are large in number or frequent the most. You can go on the website. There's a button that says you can add an event or promote an event. You go through a one-page form, literally one page, and just add those details: event name, where it's happening, few lines of description. You upload a flyer, select the city you want to promote it in, and you click submit, and that's it. In literally one click, your event is live in that city. And while that is the focus, what I'm really excited about is what we're building behind the scenes, which is more so like a B2B SaaS that allows anyone with an event to have their home for their events, to manage, to update, to create their own kind of, and this is where the community aspect comes in down the line. So you're building your own community, but the page is focused simply on events. You would be able to create your own event hub that anyone can access. Right now, it's focused on one-off events. You don't need an account. But the next release, we're very excited about. Anyone, anywhere in the world who runs events can have a home for their events that now they can use to kind of promote or market their brand.
Yeah. One of the questions I was going to ask was, what's your goal for the coming months into maybe 2026? And you answered that. So I think having a product company, you're always innovating. You're always trying to be agile and figure out what features are going to resonate most with my users. What has the perception and the reception been to date, if you don't mind me asking? What kinds of feedback have you gotten about the platform? Maybe what are some of the events that were hosted that had a lot of great attendance? I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive, right? We've been having events about conferences in Saudi Arabia, travel events in Turkey, local conferences here in Dallas for everyday meetups from professionals, networking events. So it's been really positive where people are excited to finally see events listed all in one place, right? They're asking for a resource section where we can find things related to certain categories like startups. And it's interesting because that's always been a part of our wider mission, not just events, but really connecting resources as well. Recently, I had, a friend of mine reach out and, hey, he nudged me pretty much and said, "Hey, it would be nice to have all this in one place." While that was on our product roadmap for the future, it was like, okay, there's a demand for this now. How can we accelerate this part of the process to give people what they're looking for? And that's all a part of being in product and just, and it aligned with our business objectives, right? It wasn't something that, hey, it was off the mark that, hey, we'll look at it later. This aligned with our business objectives and supports engagement on the platform, which is everything that we need in this stage.
I think the other piece of it is reflecting on some of the other guests that we've had who have talked about the power of community in their own circles, regardless of whether they're doing AI and technology related community building in the K-12 space or global community building. There's so many different facets of this. One of the things that I keep hearing is you want to be able to provide value to the attendees, to the people attending events, but also to those putting them together. It has to be a win-win for everybody involved. I remember speaking to somebody on this podcast, and the idea was if you have a coffee cart that's able to come and serve coffee at your event, that you also showcase their contribution within that ecosystem. The venue, the restaurant, places where people are coming together. As an attendee, I tend to be focused very much on, did I have a good experience, right? But then as the organizer or as the link between the attendees and the organizer, which is what you guys are doing, right? You have to have that global 360 perspective. Am I doing right by my customers who are hosting these events on my platform? Am I doing right by their attendees potentially? If they're not succeeding with their attendees, they're also not going to be hosting events, kind of thing, right? So how have you managed all these different stakeholders? I'd love to understand, your position is so unique, being that link between the organizers and the attendees. How have you managed those expectations as you grow?
Right. It's a 360 experience, and where we fall in is kind of the middle, right? Where we're the bridge between the organizer and the attendee. It's quite early for this, but it's something we noted down. And that's where the education piece comes in, the instructional design background or technology background, where we're educating people around this space on how to have better event experiences, what some of the expectations they can set when it comes to hosting and organizing a memorable experience. So this is all stuff that's going to come through our content once we start rolling that out through our social channels, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, or LinkedIn, basically educating people on this space. So it's more than just events. We're going to be educating you. You're going to be learning and how to add value to the space. And also, we're going to really just highlight this Muslim event space as a whole, because it's not been done yet, right? So you look around the events industry, which is well established, it's multi-billion-dollar market. They have conferences, they educate people, you meet people. But when it comes to Muslim events, no one is talking about it. No one is talking about the trends. And I've seen that pattern because I've done the research over the last 5 years. I've seen the patterns, I've seen the behavior, and very soon we're going to start creating content around this and really just positioning ourselves as a thought leader in this space and educating the rest of the world about this, Muslims, non-Muslims alike.
I think there's so much to be done around best practices for community building. One of the things I have on my to-do list is figuring out how to, understanding the research behind what makes successful communities scale and remain competitive in the long run, right? What are some of these fundamental principles? This is the work I do day in and day out. This is the stuff I love to talk about on. So there definitely are, there's a science. There's a science to building communities that are going to be sustainable long into the future, right? I think there's elements of psychology, sales, and marketing. There's an entire domain that's probably more around the intangibles of the experience. How do you build social connections in attendees? We've all been to events where we felt like maybe I didn't get as much value from it as I could have. Could that have been improved if I did X, Y, Z? So I'm sure there's a lot of interesting science on these topics, but how do you educate yourself on what's happening in community building? How much of it is coming from your own background and what you're doing day to day, and how much of it is inputs from research, science, influencers, or experts? I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, I forget the phrase you said earlier. You said proximity is
Is possibility, yeah.
possibility. So I'm where the action is. I'm talking to people. I'm in the trenches, as they say. I'm getting feedback. I'm doing the learning, and I'm recognizing the patterns. I'm recognizing the different themes, and that's, I guess, for me personally, I think that's a personal gift that I have, is I'm able to look at just raw data and make sense of it. So I talk to people, I get direct feedback. I see what's happening online. I'm seeing what's happening in these WhatsApp groups, the conversations that are being had. I see the need, I see the demand, and it's validating my assumptions. So it's validating my assumptions that I know from the research that I've done and how we can position Qarib as a platform to kind of solve these problems.
How many folks do you have on your team? Is it just you right now or a couple other folks as well?
So we have a core team of just me and the developers. I have a CTO. So we're a lean team. What I realized in the past is you bring on more people, it creates complexity. I have a product background now as a result of building Qarib. I understand technology. I've learned marketing and how to go to market. So we're a lean team that just gets it done. I know the problem. We work with a designer to design what we need to do, and we ship and we get feedback and iterate. Becoming more lean has allowed us to move a lot faster.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I'm a solopreneur, so I do almost everything by myself, but I rely on very strong partners for certain aspects of the business that I can't handle by myself, right? Keeping things lean, I think, helps with your operational efficiency, helps you become that much more nimble and agile in the growth of your product. What I would
Now we
love
have
to,
AI agents coming into play to kind of accelerate that.
the rise of the AI agents, I think this year,
Yeah,
2025, that's going to be the inflection point for technology, maybe for the foreseeable future, right? How do we optimize and augment our day to day with these tools? Is AI going to play a part in what you're doing? Oh, okay.
definitely. Not in this stage, but I see a lot of potential use cases. I don't want to just slap AI technology, but I see AI automating a lot of repetitive stuff that can add value to organizers, and we'll save that for later.
Yeah, no, that's definitely to come down the pipeline. I'm going to take a couple steps back, Abubakar, and move away from the tech side a little bit. And in the last portion of this podcast, ask you about the some of the essential ingredients to experience building that you believe in, right? And I'll give you an example. So when I go to an event, I have a good experience if I'm able to walk out of that event with a few people that I can hit up later and shoot the breeze about. For me, events and community building and all of these aspects of just being together in a shared space is about connection. Have I made a connection that I can hold on to as a souvenir from that event? It's funny, I actually have never maybe said this out loud, but I measure people that I meet at events kind of like souvenirs. I see them as souvenirs. To this day, I went to so many events last year. When I was doing my taxes, I was looking at all the places I traveled for work. It was insane. I went to like 16 places over the course of 2024, on average more than once. And these are flights and hotels, not locally in Boston. And I just kept thinking, as I was reading the list of all the events I went to, I didn't recognize as much or care or even remember what the event was about, but I remembered the people I met there. Like, oh yeah, when I went to Canada in August, I remember Sean, right? Or I remember Anna when I went to London. The people and those connections are the folks I still talk to a year plus after I went to those events. For me, it's always about connection. Those are the souvenirs that I walk away with and takeaways that I really take a lot of pride in being able to nurture and continue. What would that be for you? Like, what's the maybe the one word for me if it's connection? What would that be for you when it comes to experience building?
I would say honestly, it's the exact same thing, bro. I love how you framed that as a souvenir because it's about the people, it's about the connection. We go to these events to learn, but we're really looking at what connection can we make that's going to add color to our personal or professional lives in a genuine and sincere way. That's why we take the time and spend this money for flights and hotels to go to these events just to get that one souvenir. You walked away with something valuable now that you can continue to nurture, as you rightfully mentioned. Creating experience or making it easy. That's really what Qarib is about. Honestly, facilitating, you know, serendipity to really go after as much souvenirs as possible. Really go to these events and meet people. These people now become souvenirs
Yeah.
that you can continue to build on.
That's so funny. I wouldn't have thought when we started this conversation that we would have ended on souvenirs as being a takeaway. It's a great mental model, honestly, thinking about what you walk away with, what you remember from an experience. I would love to hear, Abu Bakr, what is one piece of advice you would give to somebody listening who is inspired by what they're hearing and they want to go out on their own and either do an event, bring people together, right? I'm thinking back to what you mentioned about when you were in that town where you were basically just having to put up, physical pieces of paper, right? Maybe somebody who's in that boat right now, what should they do? Like if they want to get out there, if they want to capture these souvenirs and build these experiences, what's a good way for them to take that next leap?
There's a lot that can be done. I would say starting with your intentions. Like, why are you doing this in the first place? You have to be sincere in the work that you're doing. Otherwise, when it gets rough or there's bumps in the road, you're no longer doing this because your intention or sincerity wasn't in the right place. So why do you want to bring community together in the first place? Is it to benefit the community? Is it to benefit yourself? So setting that right for someone listening and wants to do their own thing, start with your intention and sincerity and make sure that's in the right place.
Yeah, I think it's the foundational building block to so many great things, right? And fundamentally, the intention can be pure and can be something that an individual really takes upon him or herself as a North Star, right? Here's what I'm driving for. This is what I'm going to, no matter what happens, this is the definition of success for me, right? Along the way, it's guaranteed that you're going to stumble, right? But can you get back to that North Star? Can you reorient to that initial sincerity? I think that's what builds the resiliency and the sense of purpose. Like it comes with those speed bumps along the way, right? Where the sincerity can be tested. But if you can surpass those obstacles, then you get to that point where you have something more meaningful from a value standpoint, which naturally others will gravitate to. What are your thoughts there, Abubakar?
No, I agree. Thanks for adding additional context to that because there definitely will be bumps along the way, challenges that get you off your square, as they say. But what makes it easy to get back up is to know your sincerity is in the right place and you can start working towards your North Star or your for folks that might not know what a North Star is basically. And we've had several of those over the years, right? We've had a lot of trying times that tested us over and over. Today we're in the best position we can be in after having completely started from scratch, which was painful, dejecting, but we knew that this entire process journey was bigger than us. So we pick up the pieces, we pick up the learning pieces, and it allowed us to begin again just more intelligently.
Yeah, it's a fantastic story of striving against things you can both control and things that are outside your control in many cases. I think all entrepreneurs and business owners, and in some ways people that are building software solutions and building online communities, right, the product-based companies, probably see a fair share of technical, logistical, and challenges that are not just in the human domain or in the people domain of going to market. There's a whole litany of other things, right? I want to definitely host more folks like you that are product builders and product founders on the podcast in the future. To end with, Abu Bakr, what is the best way for people to find you and Qarib? I'll have the links in the show notes, but if folks want to just reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
The best place to reach out is on LinkedIn. I'm very active there, Abubakar Sheriff. You can find me. You can also follow our Instagram page at Qarib, Qariyb, and visit QARIYB.com to stay updated on the exciting stuff that's happening behind the scenes.
Fantastic. This was awesome, Abubakar. I really appreciate it. It was awesome having you not only as a guest, but I'm going to continue to follow your work and see how your platform grows. Maybe one day I can even host something on your platform.
Definitely. Jazakallah khair. You will be able to do that very soon. Thank you for having me. And I hope that, your listeners find benefit into, the conversation we had today.
Thank you so much, brother.